Well, I've come to the conclusion that there are two perceptions of reality. There's a religious perception of reality, and there's a spiritual perception of reality. The religious perception of reality is about guilt, sin, and blame, and that's the trap. That's the chains that holds every citizen. Spiritual perception of reality is about responsibility. We're all responsible. We're not guilty, we're responsible.
Power, you want to know, anyone wants to know the relationship to power. Our power is to use our intelligence to think clearly and coherently to recognize the reality we're in. That's our power. That's our access to power. Whatever's happened in the past year, I've seen many examples of power that I saw how sometimes we created this energy and this power that really worked for us because it was really cohesive, but it was temporary. And I've seen way many more times when we generated this energy, this power, but it was incoherent and emotional, and in the long run it just wasn't practical. So I've seen every variation of it, individually to collectively. But to me, it's not an abstraction. Clear, coherent. Use my intelligence to think clearly and coherently. That's power. That's what it is, right? And individually or collectively. So all energy we generate is power. It's just really how in the end it gets applied and used. And I think that most power we generate out of our energy, the energy of emotional believing, emotional reactionaryism generates the energy of power of chaos. It may have the appearance of not being chaotic, but internally it is chaotic. I mean, obviously that's why we're in the situation that we're in. People know how to organize, know how to do these kinds of things, but it's all emotional reactionaryism, so nothing's really getting solved. So I think that there's a difference between thinking and believing. I think that as human beings, we live in a society and a time where we're imprinted to believe that believing is thinking, but it's not really thinking. We're imprinted to believe that believing is thinking. And I make the distinction because to me thinking is about free flow. We're thinking, our energy is flowing, it is going where it is going. But when you take it and you change it to believing, well then the energy of thinking can't go any further than the definitions of the believe. See, so it's almost like taking the energy and flow of thinking and putting it in a box, putting it behind the walls of what believe believes. And then I think then thinking no longer is thinking, it is now believing. And it gets in the way of our being able to see. Because I make the distinction between recognizing reality and judging reality. See, I think through a thinking process, it makes it possible and easier for us to recognize the reality that we're in rather than to judge it. I think through the believing process, we judge the reality that we're in because we're not really thinking, we're believing, so we judge the reality that we're in. And we can't recognize the reality that we're in if we're busy judging it. Because like believing, judgment has its limits, has its walls. So our ability to recognize what's going on, all right, gets subverted by judgment. And we end up judging, and so when we end up becoming judgmental, it interferes with our ability to see the reality of the situation that we're in. And I think this is all imprinting. It's, we've been programmed and imprinted to perceive reality in a certain way. Well, I can't give specifics because I don't remember most of it, but I think when I look back on the past, there are a lot of things, a lot of decisions I made because of what I was believing, all right, and there are many times if I had thought a thing out more clearly and coherently than just reacting on my belief, my emotions and my beliefs, there would have probably been more coherent results. But I know that that's happened at different times in my life. It's a part of my political experience. It's just a part of my part of my living experience. So we're imprinted about sin and guilt and blame, and I think that when I look at where we're at now, society-wise, economically, politically, individually, personally, I think that blame is a way of letting ourselves off the hook. Because I think it's pointless to blame anyone. The bad guys are the bad guys, and blaming them isn't going to change it. But at the same time, when we've got the bad guys to blame, then I don't think that we take responsibility to respect the power of our creative intelligence. I don't think we're taking and dealing with the power of our creative intelligence responsibly. We're not using it to be clear and coherent. We're not using it to recognize reality because we got somebody to blame. And I think so we need to be very, very careful, all right, because we're too comfortable in the niche of emotionally reacting to what we believe, because that's basically the largest behavior patterns that are going on in the society right now. People are emotionally reacting to what they believe because they believe believing is thinking. And we're perpetuating this cycle that allows the predatory energy to exist and feed off of us. So somewhere in there, the predatory energy is responsible for its behavior, but we're responsible for our behavior. But when we get lost in this thing about just blaming the predatory energy or what we disagree with, when we get lost in just blaming what we disagree with, then I think it's a subtle way, yet a blatant way of us not taking responsibility for our own. And I'm not just saying actions, I'm saying taking responsibility for the coherent use of our intelligence. And guilt is just, and guilt, we're not guilty. Guilt gets in the way of us being able to recognize and learn from our life experiences. When people feel guilty about whatever's going on, they just perpetuate and create more guilt. They don't really learn anything. So I think that these are concepts that we really need to think about and examine. Because in reality, life is a continuum of life experiences. We're responsible for what we do. So we should, and as human beings, we've been given the power of intelligence to live this life. So we should respect that power and use it as clearly and coherently as we can. As often as we can. The objective is to do the best we can with the best we have as often as we can. But when I'm saying do the best we can with the best we have as often as we can, I'm talking about using the power of our creative intelligence clearly and coherently. I'm talking about thinking. I'm talking about taking the responsibility for that sacred power of intelligence that we have been given, and using that to do the best that we can with the best that we have as often as we can. One of the distinctions I make between teaching and programming is we're programmed to perceive reality to meet the needs of this industrial society that we're in. And programming is based upon memorization and believing. Believe the programming. We're not taught to think. Because at the end of the programming, we don't really have knowledge. We have information and data to make the machine run. Teaching means that as the teaching takes place, we learn from the life experiences. We gain knowledge about life. Teaching is about life. Programming is about a specialization within life.